Book Dragons, Laura's Bookish Life is back. I am going to go through all of the authors that I have read this year that are new to me or debuts. I hope this list doesn't get too long, but let's get into it. So, the first book that I read early in the year was A Forgery of Roses by Jessica S. Olson, and I really, really love this book. This is the Owl Crate edition. I think I got this later, so I read like an arc of it, but oh my goodness, this book was such a good story. It basically followed this character named Myra, and she has magic that lets her like paint someone and it change their like appearance or change their like abilities or stuff, and she sort of gets sucked into this political mystery because she's trying to protect her younger sister. And I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was delightful. Also, it's a standalone. I remember really, really liking this book and like being like, oh, we're definitely going to get a sequel. I don't think we are. I think Jessica S. Olson just writes standalones, but I loved it. I thought that it was a really good disability rep as well for her younger sister. And I also liked the political intrigue. It was a really, really rich world. It reminded me of reading like a Phantom of the Opera retelling, which is really, really funny because she wrote a Phantom of the Opera retelling that I really do want to read. This edition from Owl Crate is just really, really pretty as well. But I love this book, and I kept it for that reason. I don't keep a lot of books. This one got kept. It's also really, really pretty, but I will definitely go back and read books by this author in the future. I might do a reading vlog. We'll see. But yeah, really love this, and we'll definitely pick up more by this author in the future. It was by Fonda Lee, and that is Jade City. And I really enjoyed this book and really need to read Jade War. It is also the first fantasy book in quite a long time, adult fantasy book, that I read and felt like it was super approachable and for me to actually get through. So that is something that I really, really liked. If you don't know what Jade City is, it's about these mafia families, and they're sort of made more powerful by wearing jade, and they're in the middle or the start of a jade war. And I really, really like this book. I just need to go read book 2, but very, very delightful. And if you haven't seen the covers, here is the normal cover right here. I read was Lexi Ryan, and she wrote these Holo Vows. Ironically, I just got the sequel in the mail today, but here is a picture of the original book. Another book that I really, really enjoyed. It's a Fae story, and I felt like the structure of this story, sort of like a book I'm going to talk about, and it maybe not in this video, maybe the next one. This video might get super long. I just love the structure of the Fae stories. I love Faes. I mean, I've loved Faes since I read The Mortal Instrument. So I love a book about a good Fae story, but I also really like the main character in this. I thought she was very, very tenacious. It also has elements of a love triangle, which I am not sure how I feel about. When I get to book 2, I will report back, but I really enjoyed it and definitely want to read book 2. I literally just got it in the mail, so we'll see what happens with that. But overall, would definitely recommend this author, especially if you've been sort of missing, you know, your Wicked King series. Like, I know Holly Black had a very, very popular Fae series, but if you're trying to find something else that's not Fae-based, but that's more Fae-based, you might want to pick up this series because I really enjoyed it and it quenched my thirst for that one. What I'm going to chat about is The Last Chance Library by Freya Sampson. I think I'm saying that right, but here's a photo. Really fun. It basically followed this main character, and her library was pretty much going to get shut down. I think it takes place in England. I will say this is not, I would not classify this as a romance book. It is pitched as that, but I would say it's probably more women's fiction because it does have a lot more elements to the story. The HEA at the end is not really an HEA, so I think that like I would go into this more as like a self-discovery novel, but basically she's trying to save the library is what she's trying to do, and you sort of realize how important this library is to the community as a whole and the elements and you know what a library is used for, like how it's not just used to check out a book, it's used for a community and a lot of other things. And I really love this book. I go to my library maybe like once a week, so I've always been a library goer, and it just was an emotional story for me to see like how these characters, so different and so vastly different, like a young girl, an old man, the library workers, really work together to try to save this establishment. Didn't end the way that I thought it would, but I did get her second book from ALA, so I'm really excited to read that. But I would say it's definitely more women fiction and not a romance book, but I still really did like it and will probably pick up her sequel books. just if you do read them, go in knowing it's not a romance book. It's more about like women's fiction and self-discovery. But I will definitely read more books by this author in the future. I'm a little bit unsure about, so I'm going to talk about the Bone Spindle by Leslie Veeder. Here is a photo. Cool concept. It was like an LGBTQ plus story. You have a bookish treasure hunter that is trying to find this. You have like a warrior that these two girls are sort of forced to work together, and then you have this crown prince that's sort of trapped in like asleep, and these two girls have to rescue him. All of these elements sounded super cool. It was like Indiana Jones meets Sleeping Beauty. The story just felt a little bit flat for me, and like I didn't feel connected to like really any of the characters. So I don't know if I'm going to read more by this author in the future. I definitely loved her concepts. Her execution was not as strong. So this book is a little bit on my maybe list. I'll see how I feel, like if we're going to get more in this story, or if it's a standalone. I think it's the first book in a series though. But I did like the characters. The story's execution fell a little bit flat. So I don't know. It didn't wow me as much as I was hoping. And as most of the other books on this list did, this one just didn't wow me. Really loved, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is my first book by this author, but definitely won't be my last, I think. As you could see, tabbing wise, this book was delightful. But yeah, this is one of those books that is a historical fiction book told in, I think it's told in the perilous days of World War I and World War II, and these two characters' stories sort of connect. And then you also have this story is told in a really unique way because it's told by the gods. And I love that. I mean, I think that this is probably her most well-known story because it's take place in World War I and World War II. But Julie Berry has a lot of other stories that are told in like lesser-known historical time periods, which I'm super excited to uncover, and I actually have a couple of more on my to-buy list in the future. But this book was delightful. I read this right around I think I've read this around Valentine's Day, which I think was a really, really good choice. But I just thought that she was really good at captivating these stories, captivating these characters, in a really unique way to tell a story through the gods, because you don't really get stories like that. But I loved it. I really, really loved it. Whenever I read historical fiction, I'm like, oh my god, this is delightful. I should read more. And then it takes me 6 months to pick up a book. So, but I would definitely want to read more by this author. I just have to make her more of a priority. That I really, really loved, and like I'm gonna have a video project coming up about all the cozy mysteries I've read this year and how I feel about it. But Nita Prose wrote The Maid, and I devoured this book. I loved it. It was exactly what I was looking for, and here's a photo. Character, I cannot remember her name, but she's a maid in this really, really well-to-do hotel. She recently lost her grandmother, and she's definitely on the spectrum. I would say when you're in her head, it's very, very clear that she has some type of, she's on the spectrum for autism, because she's very, very by the book. She does everything her way. Her grandma used to work at this hotel, so she's sort of dealing with the grief. And even though her grandmother is dead, you do get a lot of her point of view. And she is basically accused of a murder of a man in this hotel. And she sort of gets roped into this murder mystery where she is the prime suspect because she has a really hard time relating to people. But the element of the story that I loved was not only the relationship with her grandmother and how her grandma was helping her, like how she was having conversations with her grandma in her head, but also there was just people that was just really working to save her and really working to help her out. And that was like the most heartwarming thing about this book to me. I love this main character so much, and I really devoured the story. It was great. Probably one of the best cozy mysteries I've read this year by far. Arsenic and Dobo close second, but overall it was a really, really solid read, and I am dying to see what this author writes next. Was one that I just have a little bit of mixed feelings about, and I picked up the Book Wanderers by Anna James, and here is a photo. Spindle, it had a really cool concept. It basically followed this young girl, and she recently lost her mother, and she sort of has the ability to to go into stories, or the stories come out to her. It really reminded me so much of Ghost Rider, like the original Ghost Rider, and or actually the newer Ghost Rider, the show that I'm in the middle of watching. It didn't do it for me. I didn't feel that connected to the characters, and it was a little bit confusing. I'm obviously like 35 years old. I think if I would have read it when I was younger, I would have liked it a little bit more. I think I even gave it to my students, and I don't think they loved it as much. I think that they told me. But it just wasn't the story I was looking for, so I don't know if I'm going to continue with it. I might check out another series by this author in the future, but this one just did not capture me to keep reading at the moment. If I happen to have a chance to get the audiobooks, I might listen to them, but I just didn't feel that connected to the main character. So I don't know if I'm going to continue reading stuff by this author. We will see. To explain, because I really did not like this book overall, but I like the writing style, if that makes any sense. So we're going to talk about In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winston. Here is a photo. It's a little bit complicated, so let's get into it. I went into this book with really high expectations because Riley Marie, Buckleballs, I think someone else really enjoyed it. And I read this book very, very quickly. I read this book in like a day. But I struggled with every single character and hated every single character. All these characters were super unlikable. And when I read a thriller, I need to be able to root for my characters. These characters did not do it for me. But I did like the writing style. So like I don't think this book was meant for me. It's like it follows these 6 characters. They go back to their high school college reunion, and in their fresh, like one of their last year, one of their friends died, and it sort of uncovers what happened to their friend. um the characters I hated. Every single character I did not like, but the writing style was really intriguing. So she's coming out with a thriller in August, and I might pick that one up just to see if it's that book's it just seems a little bit more interesting. But did not like this book, but the writing style has me intrigued to at least give her thrillers one more shot. Talk about is The Ivory Key. I have a really hard time saying this author's name. I apologize. So I'm just going to put the cover here. Story. It basically follows these 4 siblings. You follow the current queen, the runaway queen or the runaway sister, and then 2 brothers, and they are really ostracized. They're on different sides of a war, and they're sort of dealing with dwindling resources for magic. But they have to come together to save the day. And I liked it. I thought that this was a really unique mythology story. You don't get a lot of those in YA, so I found this one to be really engaging, really, really quick read. I also liked how I felt like I was connected to all the main characters. When you get up there into like 4 to 5 point of view, sometimes you have point of view characters you don't love as much, but I love them all, and I'm definitely going to keep reading this series. I love books about magic as a resource. I've always really liked that, so definitely going to keep reading by this author. She was definitely a nice gem and a nice surprise. So thank you, Allocrate, because this was in one of the Allocrate boxes. About all the historical romance authors that I read, I'm going to probably try to keep reading them all. But I started reading Jennifer Ashley, and she wrote The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie. I love that book. That is some people's like favorite historical, and I really loved it. I think that she did a really, really good job. So I'm definitely going to keep reading her. I also read Harper St. George, which I like that book. I don't think I loved it as much as everyone else, but I want to give book 2 a chance because I'm intrigued. And then I also read Lorraine Heath, and I love Lorraine Heath. I'm actually about to start a new series by her. So those historical romance authors are ones that like I've been dipping my toe in, and I have been pleasantly surprised by their writing. So they will probably get some more listens in the future. What is The Prison Healer by Lynette Nomi? And all I can say is this book blew my reading mind. Sniffing out clues and sort of seeing where a story goes. It's really hard to like catch me super off guard. This book did though, but you basically follow this main character Ziva, and she's working at a prison camp because she's basically been captured, and she's working as like a healing assistant. But when the rebel queen is brought in, her world is sort of turned upside down. She's always been told, she's been getting note from her parents that they are going to come get her and they're going to come rescue her after she was taken, after her dad passed away. But when this rebel queen comes, she gets a note from her parents saying, keep her alive, we are coming. So she sort of takes it upon herself to do a trial by elemental combat to kind of save this queen. The story sort of goes from there. There's a romance. There's also, she's trying to protect someone throughout this whole read, which was very, very sweet and heartwarming to me. But the end of this book blew my mind. I threw my book across the room. I called my friend. I'm like, I did not just read that. Is that what happened? So I really need to get to book 2. Like, really need to get to it. It just hasn't happened yet. This book blew my mind. Definitely going to read more by this author. I know she has a lot of adult books. I'm intrigued. So yeah, really, really excited to keep going with this series. I just need to make some time for it. The book I'm going to chat about is Love Boat Taipei by Abigail Haing Wen. And this one was one that I got from the last time I went to ALA, which was a couple of years ago, but I still had my ARC and I read it and I really enjoyed it. Haven't been following me for a long time, I'm an art and drama teacher in Queens, New York. So I am always looking for books that sort of have an element like that because I love to show my students books like that. But this follows a main character and she sort of goes off to go to Taipei, and her parents believe she's going to this like academic camp and like very, very school based. But basically, it's not really that. And she goes there and she winds up falling in love and she winds up focusing on her art and her dancing. She's a big dancing kid. And I really like this. I think that it would had a really interesting conversation about parental expectations. And as someone that works in a school system, that happens a lot. Kids always tell me, Miss Mara, no, my parents say I can't do that because it's not a viable career path. So it just was a really interesting read, and I love how she really incorporated the arts in her story, but also a lot about self-discovery. Those are the contemporaries that I really like, so I have to read her second book. I put it on a hold, and I think the hold's expired, so I'll have to do that again. But it is definitely on my list to read, so I'll definitely read more by this author in the future. Talk about is one that, again, I have sort of mixed feeling about, and that is the Matchbreaker Summer by Anna Raines. Here is a photo. Book for a blog tour from TBR and Beyond, and I struggled with this book a little bit. I think it was fine, just didn't wow me the way that I was sort of expecting it to, but it read a little bit young, so I would say this would be a good book if you're having a reader that really is like at the tail end of middle grade and wants to sort of jump up to high school or YA. It read a little bit young to me, but you basically follow this girl and her and her mom work at a summer camp, and her mom this is pretty much the last year they think, because her mom's going to get married and she's not really that thrilled about the marriage, so she kind of teams up with this bad boy to sort of separate her mom from her soon to be stepfather. And I don't love revenge stories, like when you're trying to do something. I'm reading another series right now which is all about revenge and I'm struggling. So the revenge elements were a little bit weak, and the characterization was a little bit off. So I don't know if I'm going to read more by this author in the future. I'll definitely check out the summary, but the summary I should have probably not read it, but it was okay. It was an enjoyable read. A nice summer read if you like revenge stories. I think you would like it. It just wasn't my cup of tea, but it was okay. So I'm going to have to do a summary read the summary before I decide if I'm going to read more by this author. It was okay. It didn't wow me, so that's why I'm a little bit on the fence. Goes with was Alone Out There by Riley Redgate. I don't know. I think it may have been when and how I was trying to read this. I was on another blog tour. This was the part of the year that I read a lot of blog tour books back to back, and I think I burned myself out, and this was one of them that I just struggled with, but here is a photo. Of flies in space, and these characters, they sort of get thrown up to space with no adult supervision and they have to sort of save themselves. And I don't always love Lord of the Flies retellings, I never have, but I was intrigued because I like the science element. A lot of my author friends from Australia were really upping this author, so I decided to go on the blog tour. It just didn't work for me. I'm going to try to give this author another shot and physically read their book when I'm not rushed. That was another problem. I felt really, really rushed when I was reading that. That's more of me. But if you do like science fiction stories and you like kids have to be a little bit brutal, definitely check this one out. I just don't think it worked for me. So again, summary basis will probably be if I decide if I'm going to keep reading this author. Here, I got through about half of the books I've read so far this year, and there's a lot more left. So I'm probably going to do a part 2, probably when I come back from my trip. But let me know in the comments what are some new to you authors or authors that you read this year that you would like to read more of. I've definitely have quite a few, and I've really been enjoying doing videos like this. So leave me some comments below about what videos you would like to see me do in the future, because I'm really trying to make this a more balanced content. So let me know in the comments, and I hope to hear from you guys soon. Stay safe and be well. And again, like and subscribe so we can build this community up a little bit more.